This story ends with a courtroom twist so shocking it made a Chief Justice break protocol and stand up mid-trial. Don't miss the last 5 seconds. Before we dive in, sneak into that subscribe button's house like a mystery juror and lock it in. Then ring the gavel-shaped bell so you never miss a verdict like this one. It all began when a struggling single mom walked into court and chose to testify against the very son who once saved her life. The first cold snap of October draped Pittsburgh in steel-gray clouds. On a quiet street where the maples flamed red and gold, Daniel Reed tightened the last screw on a neighborhood porch light. He'd been an electrician for 16 years. Steady hands, union card, reputation spotless. Yet tonight his shoulders sagged. Inside his pickup, the dashboard clock read 9:42 p.m. He should have been home already, winding down with a late sandwich and maybe strumming his father's old Gibson guitar. But there was a text glowing on his phone from Mom, Marla Reed. "Can we talk? Rent's due." Daniel exhaled through his nose. Rent again. He drove across town to the brick duplex they shared. Marla greeted him at the door in her faded fleece jacket, silver blonde hair in a loose bun. She looked smaller than 62, but tonight a jittery energy pulsed around her. "Danny, I lost the diner job," she said, words tumbling. "They cut hours. Said I was too slow on the register." Daniel set his tool bag down gently. "That's the third job in 6 months, Mom." "I know. But it wasn't my fault." "Mom," he interrupted softly. "I'll cover rent. We'll figure it out." They ate reheated chili in heavy silence. Marla barely touched hers. She kept glancing at her purse on the counter, as if it contained something alive. 2 days later, Saturday afternoon, Daniel returned from a service call and noticed something missing. The living room wall looked oddly bare. His father's prized Gibson Les Paul, the guitar Daniel had played at his dad's funeral, was gone. His heart thudded. "Mom, where's Dad's guitar?" Marla froze by the sink. "Oh, that old thing. I pawned it. Just until payday." "Pawned it?" His voice sharpened. "That guitar was Dad's soul." "I'll get it back," she said quickly. "I just needed a bridge loan." "A bridge to what?" Silence. Then Marla whispered the truth. Gambling debts. Online poker games that promised jackpots and left her with a 5-figure hole. Daniel gripped the counter for balance. "After everything we've been through, you didn't tell me?" "I was ashamed," she said, eyes glistening. "I thought I could fix it before you found out." The air thickened with hurt and disbelief. Daniel's phone buzzed. A call from his company dispatcher about a Sunday emergency job. He let it go to voicemail. "Mom," he said finally, steady but firm. "I'll pay the rent and buy back the guitar. But this stops now. No more online poker. Promise me." She nodded, tears brimming. "I promise." Promises can be fragile things. 3 nights later, a thunderous knock rattled the door at 12:14 a.m. Daniel jolted awake, heart racing. Police lights flared through the curtains. "Mr. Daniel Reed?" a uniformed officer asked as he opened the door. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Embezzlement and wire fraud." Daniel blinked. "There's a mistake. I'm an electrician, not an accountant." But the warrant bore his name and his company's. His mother's frightened face peeked from the hallway as the officers read him his rights. The neighbors' windows lit up like courtroom spectators. "Mom, call Grace," he managed, their longtime family friend and attorney. Handcuffed, he was led into the cold night. At Allegheny County Jail, Daniel sat on a hard bench, replaying every invoice, every payment he'd ever logged. Nothing made sense. A guard finally called his name. "Arraignment hearing at noon." Grace Kim, sharp-eyed and calm, arrived minutes before the hearing. "I've skimmed the complaint," she said, her voice low. "They claim you created phantom contracts and moved $200,000 into a crypto wallet." "That's insane," Daniel said. Grace studied him. "Is there anything you haven't told me?" "Nothing." Courtroom 5B smelled of varnish and tension. Daniel stood as the judge entered. Then he heard footsteps he knew too well. His mother. Marla Reed walked to the witness stand, pale but determined. The prosecutor rose. "Mrs. Reed, do you recognize the defendant?" "Yes," she said, voice trembling. "He's my son." Gasps rippled through the gallery. The prosecutor continued. "Did you observe suspicious financial activity on your son's computer?" Marla closed her eyes briefly. "Yes, I did." Daniel felt the floor tilt. "Mom," he whispered, but she wouldn't meet his eyes. The gavel cracked. "Order in the court." As the bailiff led Daniel back to holding, Grace's hand tightened on his arm. "This isn't over," she said. "Something's off. Way off." Daniel's heart pounded with a single, disbelieving thought. "My own mother just helped put me behind bars." The clang of steel doors echoed through Daniel Reed's bones as he shuffled from holding cell to an interview room. A single window leaked a cold dawn light. His friend and attorney, Grace Kim, was waiting, hair pulled back in a battle-ready bun. "They've set bail at $75,000, she said. "We'll fight to reduce it, but the bigger issue is the evidence." She slid a thin folder across the table. Inside were printouts, screenshots of crypto transfers, digital contracts bearing Daniel's company signature, and email chains that, on paper, proved he funneled $200,000 into an anonymous wallet. Daniel scanned them, jaw tight. "None of this is mine. The email timestamps don't even match my service calls." Grace nodded. "I believe you. But the state has your mother's testimony." The words landed like a hammer blow. While Daniel faced the sterile chill of custody, Marla Reed sat alone in her dim kitchen. The rent receipt lay on the counter like a silent accuser. She clutched her phone, scrolling through text messages from a name she saved as community helper. But he wasn't a helper. He was a loan shark with a cheerful emoji profile pic and an iron grip. His latest message pulsed on the screen. "Great work yesterday. Keep your story tight. 2 more payments vanish after final testimony." Marla's stomach twisted. She hadn't slept. The memory of Daniel's confused eyes in court replayed on a cruel loop. She wanted to scream, "I never meant for it to go this far." But fear kept her frozen. If she recanted, the debt and the men behind it would swallow her whole. By noon, Grace secured a partial bond with help from church friends and a sympathetic union rep. Daniel walked out of county jail to a drizzle-soaked sidewalk where reporters waited like vultures. "Did you steal company funds? Why did your own mother testify against you?" He ignored them, eyes fixed on the silver Subaru where Grace sat idling. Inside, Grace handed him a thermos of coffee. "You'll stay at my place for now. Safer. We start our own investigation tonight." Daniel nodded, but inside he was a storm. Every childhood memory, birthday breakfasts, his mom cheering at high school football, now felt like paper set aflame. Grace's apartment doubled as a digital command center. 2 monitors glowed with spreadsheets and forensic tools. Daniel explained every login he'd ever used, every invoice he'd approved. "Who else had access to your company laptop?" Grace asked. "Only me and, well, sometimes Trent Keller, the junior tech. He borrowed it when his unit overheated." Grace's fingers danced over the keyboard. "Trent. Interesting." She pulled up a deep packet scan of the supposed transfers. See these keystrokes. They were cloned. And look at the timestamps, 2:12 a.m. on dates you were on job sites. Someone used remote desktop injection. Daniel leaned closer. So it is a frame job. Grace gave a thin smile. We're getting warmer. 2 days later, the preliminary hearing drew a bigger crowd. Bloggers, legal podcasters, and curious retirees packed the benches. The prosecutor painted Daniel as a secret crypto gambler stealing company funds to cover high-stakes vices. Then they called Marla again. Grace whispered, "Watch her eyes." Marla stepped to the stand, clutching a tissue. Yes, I saw Daniel move large sums. Yes, he had unfamiliar crypto apps. Daniel studied her trembling hands. She wasn't lying easily. Something deeper gnawed at her. But the judge set a formal trial date, and Daniel felt the ground beneath him harden into quicksand. That night, an unexpected call buzzed Grace's phone. Deacon Paul, Daniel's old church mentor. "I read the news," he said. "I don't believe a word of it. Marla came to confession last week. She seemed terrified." Grace shot Daniel a look. "Terrified of what?" "Debt collectors," Paul said. "She begged for prayers, said she'd made a deal she can't break." Grace's eyes sharpened. That's it, the pressure point. Back at her apartment, Grace ran a different search, one that scraped dark web forums for phrases in the fake emails. A handle popped up. K303R. Daniel stiffened. "Trent Keller. My coworker." Grace nodded grimly. "Looks like Trent moonlights in crypto laundering. And he's tied to a loan shark network. They use relatives to fabricate witness statements so their marks can't fight back." Daniel gripped the table. "So they trapped my mom to trap me." Sleep proved impossible. Daniel stared at the rain-streaked window, wrestling with two truths. 1, his mother had betrayed him. 2, she was also a victim. At 3 a.m. he whispered to himself the words his late father once gave him. "A man's truth is like copper wire. You can bend it, but it still conducts light." The phrase steadied him. By morning he'd made a choice. Save his mother, even if she wouldn't save him. Grace and Daniel traced the loan shark's last known meetup spot. An old riverside warehouse converted into an off-books casino. Neon beer signs flickered like broken promises. Grace adjusted a hidden camera on her lapel. "We get evidence, we don't start fights." Inside, slot machines chimed beneath the hum of low conversations. At a back table sat Trent Keller, laughing with a thick-necked man Daniel instantly recognized from Marla's phone photo. "Community helper." Grace whispered, "Bingo." They snapped covert photos, capturing Trent sliding a flash drive across the table. Suddenly Trent looked up, eyes narrowing. "Danny. What the?" But Grace was already pulling Daniel toward the exit. They'd risked enough. The evidence card in Grace's pocket felt heavy as salvation. Meanwhile, Marla sat in a dingy motel room above a neon-lit casino. The loan shark's last text still burned on her screen. "Remember, one wrong word and your son pays double." She pressed her palms to her temples. Memories assaulted her. Daniel holding her hand after his father's funeral. Daniel saving every extra dollar to cover her medical bills. A wave of shame crashed over her. What have I done? Near dawn, Daniel received a tip from Deacon Paul. "She's at the Riverlight Motel." He drove through a foggy dawn that matched his mood and knocked softly on room 27. When Marla opened the door, her face looked 10 years older. "Danny!" He stepped inside, heart aching but voice calm. "Mom, I know about Trent. About the debt. About the blackmail." She crumpled into a chair. I just wanted it to stop. Daniel knelt before her. We can still fix this. But we have to tell the truth, together. Marla sobbed, whispering the question that haunted her. Can you ever forgive me? Daniel pulled her into a steady embrace. I already have. Back at Grace's apartment, the three of them mapped a bold strategy. Step 1. Marla files a sworn affidavit detailing the blackmail. Step 2. Grace turns the warehouse evidence over to federal cybercrime units. Step 3. Present both to the judge at the upcoming emergency motion. Grace looked at them with quiet determination. It's risky. But the truth is now our strongest weapon. Daniel reached for his mother's hand. Then we fight as a family. 2 days later, as rain lashed the courthouse windows, Grace filed the emergency motion. The judge set a special session tomorrow morning. Daniel squeezed his mother's hand outside the courtroom. Tomorrow, he said, we bring the real criminals into the light. A pale Pittsburgh sunrise washed the courthouse steps in weak gold as Daniel Reed, his mother Marla, and attorney Grace Kim climbed the wide granite stairs. Today wasn't the official trial. It was something rarer. An emergency evidentiary motion, their one chance to expose the blackmail ring before the main hearing. Grace set a calming hand on Daniel's shoulder. Stay steady. The judge will sense the truth in how you carry yourself. Inside, rows of wooden benches creaked under the weight of reporters and curious onlookers. The hum of whispers sounded like a storm gathering offshore. When the bailiff called the case, Marla stepped forward, clutching a thin folder. Daniel felt her hand tremble in his. The prosecutor looked up, startled. Mrs. Reed, you've already testified. Grace rose smoothly. Your Honor, new evidence compels a sworn correction. Judge Mercer's eyes narrowed. Proceed. Voice quivering but clear, Marla said. I gave false testimony. I was coerced by a criminal network that threatened my life and my son's reputation. I am here to tell the full truth. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Flashbulbs popped. Grace placed on the evidence table a flash drive and high-resolution photos from the Riverlight warehouse. These prove Mr. Trent Keller and an accomplice created deepfake emails and funneled stolen funds through Daniel Reed's company logins. The judge leaned forward. Mrs. Reed, are you aware of the penalty for perjury? Tears welled, but she met his gaze. Yes, Your Honor. I accept it. For the first time in weeks, Daniel saw his mother's back straighten with unshakable dignity. The courtroom doors burst open as federal cybercrime agents entered, flanking a startled Trent Keller. Behind them came two plainclothes detectives with a heavy-set man in cuffs, the so-called community helper, real name Gordon Pike. Grace presented the agent's overnight forensic report. Exact digital fingerprints of Trent's remote desktop hacks. A timestamped security footage from the Off-Books casino showing the flash drive handoff. A blockchain records tracing the embezzled crypto back to Trent's wallet. The room buzzed like an electrified hive. The prosecutor, red-faced, asked for a recess. Judge Mercer refused. The court will hear this through. As arguments flew, Daniel sat utterly still. Inside, memories flickered. His father soldering copper wires in the garage. The old lesson. Truth is like copper wire. You can bend it, but it still conducts light. That line had carried him through sleepless nights and now burned steady in his heart. When the judge invited him to speak, Daniel simply said, I don't seek revenge. I seek the truth, so no other family is torn apart like ours. Even the reporters lowered their pens. A rustle swept the courtroom as Pennsylvania's Chief Justice Eleanor Wexler entered, flanked by clerks. Normally she would only review transcripts, but she had read the emergency motion and come in person. She stepped to the bench beside Judge Mercer, scanning the evidence with piercing gray eyes. Then came the moment that would replay on every news channel that night. Chief Justice Wexler stood up, breaking centuries of decorum, and addressed the court directly. When a citizen and his mother choose painful honesty over fear, the very foundation of justice is renewed. This case will not proceed as a routine trial. It will stand as a precedent for protecting families targeted by digital extortion. A collective breath filled the room. Even hardened journalists blinked back tears. Agents escorted Trent Keller and Gordon Pike forward as Judge Mercer read the swift ruling. Immediate dismissal of all charges against Daniel Reed. Criminal indictments for cyber fraud, extortion, and evidence tampering against Trent and Pike. Protective custody and counseling offered to Marla Reed as a cooperating witness. The gallery erupted, some in applause, others in stunned silence. Grace squeezed Daniel's arm. "It's over. You're free." But Daniel only looked at his mother, eyes soft. "We're free." Outside, TV cameras crowded the courthouse steps. One reporter called out, "Daniel, do you hate your mother for what happened?" He paused, then answered with a calm strength that silenced the crowd. "Hate doesn't build homes. Truth and forgiveness do." The quote headlined every evening broadcast. That evening, back at the duplex, Marla brewed chamomile tea. The once-pawned Gibson guitar rested safely on its wall hook. Grace had already reclaimed it from the pawn shop. "I don't deserve this kindness," Marla whispered. Daniel strummed a gentle chord. "None of us deserve forgiveness. We give it because love is bigger than our worst mistakes." For the first time in months, mother and son shared a quiet, unburdened meal. In the weeks that followed, Daniel returned to work, his reputation stronger than ever. Grace, inspired by the case, launched a pro bono digital truth project to protect other families from deepfake scams. Marla began a gambling recovery program, telling her story to warn others. The Chief Justice sent a handwritten note. "Your courage reminded this court why justice exists." Daniel framed it beside his father's old photo. On a clear Sunday morning, Daniel stood with Marla on their porch as church bells rang across the neighborhood. "I thought I'd lost you," she said softly. "You never will," he replied. The sun broke through steel-gray clouds, glinting off the copper wires in his tool belt, a quiet symbol that truth, bent but unbroken, still carried light. 2 weeks after the courtroom whirlwind, Daniel Reed woke to a rare sound in his house. Silence without fear. No calls from lawyers. No midnight knocks. Just the smell of coffee and autumn rain. He found Marla, his mother, humming softly as she folded laundry. "I start my first therapy group today," she said, eyes shy but hopeful. "Gambling recovery. I'm nervous, but it's time." Daniel smiled. "Proud of you, Mom. Truly." They shared coffee while the Gibson guitar hung proudly on the wall, a quiet witness to how far they'd come. Later that day, Daniel met Grace Kim at their old church fellowship hall. Grace's laptop glowed with a new logo. Digital Truth Project. "We're live," she announced. A non-profit hotline for anyone targeted by deepfake scams and family blackmail. Volunteers, lawyers, and cyber experts are signing on nationwide. Daniel blinked. "Already? Your case went viral," Grace said with a grin. "People want to help." Daniel felt a steady warmth. The nightmare that nearly broke them was becoming a shield for others. That evening, Marla attended her first Gamblers Anonymous meeting. She listened as others shared stories of lost paychecks and broken trust. When her turn came, she stood, voice trembling. "I lied in a courtroom and nearly destroyed my son. But he forgave me. I'm here to forgive myself and start over." Applause filled the small room, gentle, accepting. For Marla, it was the sound of grace. The next morning, Daniel's phone buzzed with a number he barely recognized. "Daniel Reed?" A calm female voice asked. "This is Chief Justice Eleanor Wexler. I'd like to meet with you and your mother." Hours later, they sat in the grand marble rotunda of the state Supreme Court. Wexler approached without ceremony. "Your courage reminded this court that justice must adapt to new digital crimes," she said. "We're launching a family cyber integrity task force, and I'd like you both to be its first civilian advisors." Daniel exchanged a stunned glance with Marla. "You want us?" "I want people who've lived it," Wexler replied. 1 month later, Daniel stood before a packed electricians' union hall. The same workers who once doubted him now cheered as he finished a talk on digital fraud prevention. Beside him, Marla shared her own 5-minute testimony on gambling addiction and forgiveness. Her voice no longer wavered. "If you've fallen," she told the crowd, "the only thing stronger than shame is the choice to stand back up." A standing ovation thundered through the hall. Word of their story traveled far beyond Pennsylvania. Churches invited Daniel and Marla to speak. Podcasts featured Grace explaining deepfake detection. Donations poured into the Digital Truth Project. Within 6 months, their hotline had saved hundreds of families from financial ruin. Daniel reflected one night, strumming the Gibson guitar on his porch. "Dad always said truth is like copper wire. You can bend it, but it still carries light. Now that light's reaching places we never dreamed." On a crisp Sunday morning, Daniel surprised Marla with a small ceremony in their backyard. Friends gathered under strings of warm lights. "I know what this is," Marla teased. "Another one of your speeches." Daniel shook his head, smiling. "It's a forgiveness covenant. I want us to sign it and hang it next to Dad's photo. Our promise to stay honest whatever storms come." They both signed. Cheers and quiet tears followed. Later that night, mother and son sat under a clear sky filled with stars. "You never gave up on me," Marla whispered. "I couldn't," Daniel replied. "Family isn't about who never falls. It's about who reaches back down." Above them, the autumn constellations blazed like living copper wires across the heavens. Daniel turned toward an imaginary camera, the way a podcast host might speak to listeners around the world. "If someone you love has betrayed you, remember this. Truth bends but does not break. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It transforms it. Share this story with anyone caught in a dark web of lies, and subscribe for more real stories of justice and redemption. Let's keep the light moving forward." With that, the screen would fade to the Digital Truth Project's helpline and a final message. "Truth always finds a circuit. Pass it on."